A report appears to clear managers at San Diego's YMCA following allegations of staff mistreatment and questionable contracts. A best-selling author of medical thrillers says smartphones are spawning a digital revolution in medicine with big impacts on patients and physicians. And the city of San Marcos has quietly become a model of smart growth with neighborhoods close to public transit that put the brakes on urban sprawl. I'm Mark Sauer. The KPBS Roundtable starts now. Welcome to our discussion of the week's top stories. I'm Mark Sauer. And joining me at the KPBS Roundtable today are Amitha Sharma, investigative reporter with KPBS News. Hi, Amitha.
Hi, Mark. And
reporter Gary Robbins, who covers science and technology for the San Diego Union Tribune. Hi, Gary. Good to see you back.
Thank you.
And reporter Maya Sri Krishnan of Voice of San Diego. Hi, Maya.
Hi,
welcome. It's good to see you today. Well, the allegations were serious. Managers of San Diego's vast YMCA network of branches were accused of mistreating staff, forcing out certain executives, including minorities, and awarding contracts based on personal relationships instead of merit. The YMCA of San Diego County hired a consultant to look into these complaints, and this week the report is out, sort of. Amitha, start with some of the more troubling allegations that led to this review.
Well, Mark, you basically listed them, but to elaborate on what you said, over the last couple of years, several longtime, well-respected executive directors and senior managers have been asked to leave the YMCA, and it's not clear why. And in some of these cases, it appears that there were some payouts made, possible payouts, according to tax documents that were filed, and also confidential settlements. In the case of one employee, she left with a $236,000 payment. Another former executive director left with a $136,000 payment. In terms of contracts with vendors, there is a policy at the YMCA that requires branches to buy 85% of their cardio exercise equipment from a vendor called Precourt. Now, this policy came down at a time when a regional vice president at the YMCA was in a relationship with a sales representative at Precourt. They have some new software that has given them some problems. This comes after a task force was put together to select a company that would provide new software services. The task force recommended one company, but an executive told the corporate board that actually a recommendation for a company called Daxco was made, and now there are problems with this Daxco software. So, and there's also been some questions about manipulation of membership figures. So those are the allegations that the investigator was supposed to look at.
Okay, so a lot of troubling stuff and raising some eyebrows, at least with the contracts and all,
right,
and how they were let. So who was this consultant hired? This was an outside person.
The consultant is a woman by the name of Deanna Baker. She's a lawyer. She's an investigator. She does these probes at workplaces looking into harassment, retaliation, discrimination. She, I believe, started her investigation sometime in July, and then I'm told it wrapped up late last week.
Okay, but we're getting an inkling of the high points of what they found, but the report's not really out to the public yet.
The report has not been made public. I've asked for a copy of the report. Sometime this week, the corporate board president, so the corporate board is the one who oversees the president and CEO of the YMCA. His name is Baron Hurtelin Doherty. The corporate board president sent out an email to branch managers. The email was carefully worded. He said that the investigation found no financial fraud, it found no unlawful discrimination, and it found no violation of the YMCA's mission. Now, people on the inside tell me that, look, there's a whole lot that may not rise to that level. It may not rise to breaking the law, but there's a whole lot underneath there. There's mismanagement, there's incompetence, and they believe that the investigation is a whitewash and that the whole matter will be buried.
And you've got a lot of response along those lines this week with your follow-up story.
I have been inundated by people who work at the YMCA, who used to work at the YMCA. The phone won't stop ringing, and I've just gotten tons of email messages.
Now, let's talk a little bit about the scope of this organization. Of course, everybody's heard of the YMCA, but this is a big organization in San Diego.
Yeah, this is. In fact, the YMCA of San Diego County is the second largest in the country, and it's the 7th largest employer in San Diego County.
So it's a big institution.
It's a big institution, and last year alone, it served 400,000 people, and through its child care programs, through its sports programs, its youth programs, senior citizen programs, exercise programs. I mean, there are just a lot of people that go to the Y for a lot.
Now, the new CEO that we're talking about here, how new is he, and what are some of the changes he made that's beyond these specific allegations that are kind of troubling people there?
He came on board around 4 or 5 years ago, and the knock against him is that this is a guy who's been a poor leader, that he's autocratic, that he's a sort of my way or the highway guy, that it is on his watch that there's been this exodus of upper management, that it's on his watch that there was a change in policy which eliminated a youth membership discount program that a lot of people relied on, and that then kind of turned away low-income people from the YMCA. This is what's being alleged, of course, and that he ought to be ousted. That's what people are saying. We've asked for an interview with him. We did a preliminary interview with him.
That was my next question. What's his response?
Well, he declined to talk to us for the last 2 stories that we did, but back in December we did a preliminary interview with him, and you know, he's a pretty vibrant, energetic guy who's got a big personality. I think he has one vision for the YMCA. Other people have another vision. At this point, he appears to have the support of the corporate board, but people again on the inside tell me that he's got about half the support from his upper managers. It's not clear how he leads going forward. His contract, I'm told, expired on September 30th, which was Wednesday, and it appears that the board is behind him, that they support him.
Is there, Gary?
Well, if the consultant says there's not a problem, why can't they be transparent and just give you the entire report with footnotes and everything to settle it?
Right, and that is how you settle it. It's not clear. I mean, you can only speculate at this point, right? If people don't release a report, if they don't make it public, then obviously the conclusion that's leaped to is that, oh, they've got something to hide. You know, people whom I've spoken to who were actually questioned by the investigators say that the investigation appeared to be very thorough, that they were that she was hitting all of the key points that they had heard about, seen, had experienced themselves, and so they are unwilling to rely on the characterization of the corporate board president, who says that, you know, there hasn't been any wrongdoing. So, you know, again, I've asked for the report. They're a nonprofit. They're not obligated to release it. I was hoping that somebody would leak it to me. That's not happened so far.
And what about transparency regarding the board itself? Can people come to meetings? Is there open comment, this sort of thing, or is this kind of a closed system?
It's pretty much a closed system unless they open it. And I can tell you, I have contacted the corporate board numerous times over the past several months, and I mean, they don't even acknowledge that I've contacted them.
So they don't reply,
No.
not looking. So a few seconds left on this segment. What about the folks who, as we said at the outset, many people use their services, they're connected, they're engaged with the Y. How does this really affect them? You did mention that some of the low-income folks are having a harder time without the discount.
Well, again, you know, I'm told by people on the front lines that all of this tumult at the top has been a distraction from the Y's mission, which is, you know, outreach to people, outreach to youth, outreach to people who just don't go out and exercise, and that, you know, there are education programs, there are specific segments of the population that need to be told that, look, we're here, and that membership isn't growing because the focus isn't there, that they believe that the focus is on turning the Y into a sort of spa fitness type of club. And if you do that, if they're successful, and again, it comes to different visions. I mean, I think this is people are saying this is Barron's vision, and maybe this is the corporate board's vision, but other people are saying that, look, the Y has traditionally served this whole group of people, seniors, low-income people, youths who, you know, are inner-city kids who don't have a place to go to after school, that wouldn't be exposed to sports. And they're saying that, look, if you go in the direction that Barron wants to take it to, you'll end up ignoring this very important segment of the population.
All right, well, we'll see what happens with the board and the management as we go forward. All right, thanks. Now, what if you could have your doctor with you at all times? That may be coming in the near future, according to Dr. Robin Cook, who's best known as the best-selling author of medical thrillers. And here's Cook describing what technology could soon bring to medicine.
We have Siri. Why not take it a step beyond? And suddenly I realized to myself, we're looking for primary care physicians. We're looking to lower costs. We want to incorporate genomics. Nanotechnology is coming down the line. IT is advancing so rapidly, particularly with wireless sensors, etc. This convergence of all these things, I woke up in the middle of the night at 3 o'clock in the morning and I said, the cell phone is going to be the doctor.
Yeah, there you go.
And I said, all right, now how do I write? How do I make this entertaining?
Well, Dr. Cook, who's very charismatic, as you can see, made his case this week to physicians and scientists in La Jolla. And Gary, you've covered science and technology for a long time. This is a novel, this book, Cell, but are the principles in there and what he's discussing sound?
This is the near future. A lot of the technologies he's talked about exist already in the phone or can be connected to the phone. The IT that he talked about, I mean, you can already use your phone to measure many different things. In fact, you can hook up your phone to monitor all the things that you would monitor in an intensive care unit. You know, the wires could simply go into it. Now they're going to go to the second stage. They'll be able to do blood samples and saliva samples. That takes it much deeper. So rather than just knowing your blood pressure or your heart rate, you begin to get biological information. He argues that, you know, within a short period of time, with this convergence between what you can sense on these things and the ability of the algorithms to quickly process an information, that it'll all come right into the phone, that the phone will tell you, well, you know, your temperature is off and your white blood cells are out of balance, you know, you need to see a doctor. So this is meant to replace primary care physicians in some places, but not entirely.
How do doctors view this? Do they feel threatened by this?
Doctors do feel threatened. There was a lot of it that surfaced yesterday at a meeting at a conference in La Jolla. Doctors feel there's a sense of paternalism, that the public can't understand this kind of information, and perhaps that they shouldn't even have this kind of information about themselves. But there's a big societal pushback. All of these instruments are now giving us our own data. We can take data about ourselves. And as we look at it, we're asking more and more questions. So as the programs become better and can give us better answers, well, we can look at it and think, I'll use the doctor as a mentor. This was something that was talked a lot about yesterday. And what they talked about was, well, that could drive healthcare prices down. Now, doctors are under great pressure. They're under great financial pressure to bring prices down. Technology is competing with them to do that. So if you could do tests that cost little or nothing, where you don't have to see a doctor for some simple things, then perhaps you're bringing the prices down.
Well, the implications of this, and as long as we're on the price, I was going to get to that a little later, the implications are enormous because, as you say, if you don't have to go in for a simple test and the cost of getting there and parking and the test itself and the doctor's fees and the lab technicians and all of that stuff, I mean, that lowers the profit to the doctors and all the folks in the chain, plus the insurance companies who take their bit out of all of that. I mean, if we're looking with Obamacare and these other pushes, not just in this country but elsewhere, to lower costs, it seems like this is the happy marriage, at least from the patient standpoint.
Well, they talked at the conference yesterday about the fact that more people have health care, but that doesn't, or they're insured, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they have more health care. They may not be able to get in to see a doctor. So the idea that your phone could perform the function of many doctors for many things is appealing on many levels. And there's another part of it. It's a so-called telemedicine movement, the telehealth movement, where you get all this information and then you talk to a doctor on your cell phone or on your iPad. You don't have to drive to an emergency room, which are very expensive, or a hospital for a regular appointment. You can get to a specialist more quickly. And they're trying to bring down the prices of that. John Scully was there talking about it. He was the president of, or the chief executive of Apple, you'll remember. And he talked about there's going to be a force down of prices, that a lot of these companies they're copying Amazon in that it's about bringing price down and bringing experience up. So if you can make this a good experience that is valuable to people, then people will take to it, and people will turn away from some areas of medicine, possibly reducing the cost and increasing the number of people who actually get health care.
I wonder, too, and again, there's so many aspects of this, we could talk an hour about it, but the generational thing, right now, I think everyone realizes older people are using a far larger percentage of the healthcare services in our system, and they're less likely to turn to technology. Younger people are not afraid of these. They're on these phones, they're on these devices all the time. So I wonder if first it'll come to younger people, and maybe they'll get their parents and grandparents to come around at some point, too.
It feels like the opposite is true. A few years ago, it was true that older people were very wary of technology, but they have made it so easy to use that you look around, if you go to Fashion Valley, any place where people gather and where you see older people, they all have cell phones, and many of them have iPads. It's become part of their life. They're now streaming information into their phones. They can adjust it for the sake of vision and for sound. So I don't think it's a matter anymore that older people don't like the technology. I think the big question will be, can they understand what they're told? So if the phone tells you something medically, do you have a good enough education or a basic understanding to know what you're being told and
Could
use
there
that?
be situations where your phone tells you one thing and your doctor tells you another thing? And if so, then who do you listen to?
There absolutely
Or
could
what do
be,
you listen
and this
to?
came up yesterday because one of the people were saying in the future prescriptions will come from algorithms. An algorithm will say, you need prescription A. Well, that may be different than what your doctor said, but a lot of people feel that the algorithm is better because it's taking all of the information about all the prescriptions ever written about a person like you in that particular health situation and crunching that data and trying to figure out what is best.
But does a doctor not have the capacity to do that? I mean, an algorithm is considered superior to what a doctor's advice would be?
Well, it depends on the circumstance. We all know how busy doctors are. They were saying yesterday that doctors have like 5,000 visits per year. So when you go to your doctor, we all feel that little movement where they're anxious to move on to the next patient. Can they be up on everything, every type of health issue? And John Scully joked about the fact that what do doctors do? I don't know the extent, but he said, well, they look at Google and they look at Wikipedia. You wouldn't think it's true, but I've had a physician show me a package that is used for doctors that doctors consult about various drugs, and then have him prescribe a drug for me. He's using a database because he can't keep it all here. He keeps it here.
Now, what about, we got a few seconds left, but I wanted to get into the whole bedside manner. I mean, Siri is wonderful and warm to a point, but this is, a robotic voice talking to you. And what about your doc reassuring you and all of that stuff?
This is where I disagreed with Dr. Cook. The question of empathy. There's a very devastating scene in his book where a man is given really devastating news that he's going to die in short order from cancer. Well, he gets the information from the phone. Can a phone be empathetic, even if you make the voice on it empathetic? Can it truly relate to you like another human can?
Right. So that part of the care is really, that hasn't been worked out yet.
That remains to be seen.
All right. Fascinating stuff. I'm sure you'll be doing more on this topic. Very interesting. Well, we're going to shift gears. At first blush, the North County city of San Marcos might seem the perfect example of Southern California sprawl. It is, after all, a suburb far from the big city. But look a bit closer. The idea of smart growth, that's putting new residential and commercial development around transit centers, is thriving in San Marcos. And Maya, what is San Marcos doing right now in terms of smart growth?
Well, they're doing a couple of different things. The primary thing that they're doing is they are trying to focus and encourage development around their transit stations, so around the Sprinter light rail stations, and they are trying to build residences and commercial and retail space there to kind of focus denser populations and try to encourage use of those transit areas. And they're also trying to create streets and road designs that are more pedestrian and bicycle friendly.
And that's really the definition of smart growth that we've trying to see in other parts of the county.
Yeah, walkability, compact, dense, pretty much.
You're right there, and the whole idea, of course, is to limit automobile trips, to get people walking on public transit, the impact on climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, the whole shot. Well, was this a master plan? We've talked on this show recently about master plans and the county's plan and this project and that project, and we'll get to a couple of those later on. But Is this something that just happened naturally there? Did they have some leadership who just wanted to go in this direction in San Marcos?
I think that they've had leadership to go in that direction for a long time. They actually started making plans for these things in about 2007 is when they tried to pass their specific plans for different parts of the city, and they included a lot of these smart growth plans in those. For example, by the university, the Cal State San Marcos, they tried to include these things ahead of time. And the Sprinter was brought into service at about, I think, in 2008.
Tell us what the Sprinter is briefly for those folks not familiar with it.
The Sprinter is a light rail that goes between Oceanside, Escondido, Vista, and San Marcos.
It used to be in the old days, the interurban railways, which were common in this country, but only revived recently. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Oh,
so go ahead, the Sprinter. And so they worked it around the Sprinter
Yeah,
stations,
so they really started planning for it as soon as they knew that the Sprinter was going to come online. And I think that they had a couple of hiccups. They kind of started their planning right in the middle of the recession, and now that there are more funds and developers are kind of getting more encouraged financially, they can kind of take those plans up again.
Okay, now is this because there's not a lot of opposition to smart growth up there, as we've seen pushback in other areas of the county and other cities?
Well, from what I understand, there was some opposition back in 2007 when they originally tried to pass these plans, and I think that I'm not exactly sure what the specifics were of what people were opposing, but basically anytime you try and change what plots of land are going to be used for, there's some opposition. And a lot of that they got through community buy-in and communicating with the community and kind of taking their input. And I think that San Marcos, by these stations, has the benefit of having kind of young university populations that might be a little more open.
All right, and in your story, you said the numbers aren't huge on the use of transit yet, but what was encouraging was the growth in those numbers here just in recent years. Tell us, give a little of the breakdown there.
Yeah, so San Marcos, the ridership is fairly low for most Sprinter stations. In San Marcos, that's also true. But one of the San Marcos stations actually had an increase, the one by Cal State, had an increase of almost 60% in the past couple of years, which is huge. And it really shows that more people are starting to move into that area and starting to use it. And
it's going in that direction. You also mentioned in your story that San Marcos teamed up with Circulate San Diego, and tell us who they are, and they're trying to make streets work for bikes and pedestrians. How did that all go? So Circulate San Diego is a transportation advocacy organization here, and they were working with the city around the Palomar College Station to kind of implement road designs that made it safer for pedestrians and bicyclists. So that meant better bike lanes, sidewalks, crosswalks, ways to slow down traffic so pedestrians weren't scared to walk around there and things like that. Okay. Is it terribly hilly? As a bicyclist here, one of the big problems is not so much the busy streets, which is a big problem, but the darn hills. I mean, if the colleges and the transit lines and everything's close together, that helps too.
Yeah, I think it helps if you can walk or you don't have to go that far. So it definitely, it's all part of the process that they're improving these roads, and they're also putting in residential buildings nearby so that you don't have to bike 3 miles to get to the nearest transit station. You might only have to go 1/4 of a mile.
And that's the idea. And they have some vision there too. You talked in your story about shuttles that are not there yet, but they're coming to get you to transit stations and to get you out of cars, and another way to get more mass transit used. Explain how that's going to work.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons why I think San Marcos has been so successful, is that they are very forward-looking. So what they've done is they've kind of already planned out a route and a way to fund a bus that would go from downtown, which is further from these stations, to these stations. And so when there is a demand for people from downtown to want to come and take the Sprinter, they'll be able to implement it fairly easily.
Now, I want to talk about, go ahead, Gary. Yeah.
Well, this doesn't surprise me. You mentioned Cal State San Marcos 3 times in that setup. San Marcos is 26 years old. The way they planned that university seems to be really well done. They're connected so well to the interests of North County, South Orange County, Temecula. If you look what they're putting out in programming, cybersecurity, biotech, palliative care, life sciences, and they're connecting really well. They're becoming the hub of San Marcos. That is the guiding light of that city. They're now up to 12,000 students. That's going to go to 14, 15, 20 before very long. that will be another San Diego state in size. You know, within our lifetimes, it'll be that large. So it's interesting to see how it's all being connected together.
And you're saying they have the advantage then of kind of starting fresh with a blank canvas rather than transforming older cities.
And I think that they're definitely trying to make that transition from being a suburban area to kind of having this urban kind of center by the university. To make it more of a destination.
Well, we only have a short time left, but we have talked on this show about Lilac Hills, which is up in the Valley Center area, another development, one Paseo, Carmel Valley, ways apart, but they both have been criticized for failing to adhere to these smart growth things. What are those doing wrong, briefly, and what's San Marcos doing right?
Well, so one Paseo, for example, it is being developed in an area that Carmel Valley is already fairly dense, and it was kind of this last 23-acre plot of land that they were trying to develop, but it's not near any public transportation. And so one of the big concerns was that it's going to increase traffic and vehicle usage. And Lilac Hills, on the other hand, Lilac Hills, within the boundaries of the development itself, it is walkable, and it's near the I-15, but it's not anywhere near where there will be public transportation anytime in the near future.
So not this model that we've seen with San Marcos. Well, we'll look forward to follow-up stories and see how all this pulls together. Well, that does wrap up another week of stories at the KPBS Roundtable. I'd like to thank my guests, Amitha Sharma of KPBS News, Gary Robbins of the San Diego Union Tribune, and Maya Sri Krishnan of Voice of San Diego. A reminder, all of the stories we discussed today are available on our website, kpbs.org. I'm Mark Sauer. Thanks for joining us today on the Roundtable.